Are we ready to start?
Not yet, Prof. They still
Not yet. Okay.
connecting.
All right. So you let me know when I can start. All right.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Please apologize for keep you waiting. So before we start again our session, may I kindly make a housekeeping announcement again? Please make sure that you mute yourself and please leave all the questions at the end of the talk, and you can actually post your questions at the Q&A even at the middle of the talk, but just post, and then at the end of the talk we can you can also unmute yourself. So now I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Dr. Harbindar Jeet Singh. I think everybody knows Prof Harbindar. Prof is a professor of physiology, and I think Prof have everybody knows who he is. Is one of the is everybody knows, so I'm out of the words. So I would like to deliver Prof to deliver his talk. Very important. It's titled "Writing a Problem or Purpose Statement and a Research Question in a Research Proposal." So, Prof, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rosfaiza. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Hope you all are keeping safe and well. Now, before I talk about how to write a problem statement, uh, just allow me to quickly recap a little about a typical research proposal. What is a typical research proposal? Very simply, a research proposal is a document that provides detailed description of the intended research. That's what it is. And you usually write it, or it is usually written to get some funding, or perhaps some ethical approval, or approval to carry out research in an institute, or all of them together. Yeah. Now, basically, very simply, actually, when you look at a research proposal, what is the idea? It is actually prepared to convince the reviewers, if you like, or to actually sell your idea. That is what it is basically. So when you're preparing a research proposal, you have that in mind. You want to prepare a document that actually will help you sell your idea to the reviewers and to the funders, if you like, or the people or the authorities who are going to approve your research. Right? So when we are preparing a research document, there are some components in there that we have to address, that we have to include. So what are the major components in a research proposal, or that you need to, or that have to be included in your research proposal? Right? So basically, any research proposal for that matter, this is very fundamental, if you like. This is a generic, proposal. Typically, what it must do is it must describe why the research that you are proposing should be done and what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, and what is the expected output. What would be the benefit, if you like, and also what is the significance or relevance or benefit of the output. For example, your findings will improve understanding on the topic, or it will impact on policy making, or it might fulfill a national or a public policy. All right. So typically, this is what a research proposal will contain. And of course, it will have the cost as well. You have to budget, because that is at the end of the day, that's what you are asking for, the money as well. So you sell the idea to get the money to do what you want to plan to do. Usually, if I may recap, usually a research proposal um, has a number of sections. All right. So this is what in the main, what I've shown here is this is why, what, how, what, significance, all these have to be included. But they come under sections. All right. So a research proposal will have sections like the executive summary, and that is very important. All right. So really, I think the way you frame the executive summary is very important, because that's the first thing the reviewers will read and will look at. And that is like a shop window, if you like. All right. And so it'll have the executive summary. Then it will also have the background to the research. All right. This is where the literature search is done, and you try to include references, information that will help to highlight the problem statement that you'll be making afterwards. All right. And then, of course, you will have a research question. Then you'll have the research methodology, which has to be really described very well, your research design particularly. It has to be right, it has to be appropriate, correct for the research question that you're asking. So it must match that as well. And then, of course, you have the budget, and they will ask you about the benefits, the significance, and all that. All these have to be, put into a research proposal. All right. So this morning, what I will probably just concentrate upon is how you would construct a problem statement. All right. A problem statement is a very important part of the research proposal. All parts are important, by the way. All parts are important. A problem statement is important in the sense you need to highlight the need for the study. All right. And usually a problem statement, will contain a little bit of all these. All right. Why it should be done, what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, what is expected output, and what's the significance. So these are the things that you probably will have to incorporate in your problem statement. You don't have to mention anything about the costs of the research in the problem statement, just about these, why it is important to do the research, or what is the problem that is pressing that needs to be sorted out, and therefore you need to do this research. So this is what you need to, these will be parts of course, they have their own sections, but these should be reflected in the problem statement. All right. So as I mentioned just now, problem statement is an essential part of any research proposal. All right. And so what is a problem statement? It is actually a very brief and a clear description of the existing issue or problem which has to be addressed. All right. So it needn't have to be very long, but in that problem statement, you have to clearly describe the existing problem and why it has to be addressed. All right. So it should therefore provide a context for the research study. So when you say this problem exists, there has to be some evidence, of course, a lot of it will be in the literature background, in the literature review that you would be including in the proposal. But here you have to make some overall, provide some context to the research problem, to the study, why there is a need to have this study. And what you need to do is you need to always be aware that you have to make a very strong case. Don't expect the reviewer to make the case for you. All right? You have to make the case and make it as strong as possible for the reviewer, to convince the reviewer that this is a problem, an important problem, a problem that needs to be addressed. It has to be researched and it has to be investigated. All right? So this is what is important. The other thing that will happen, of course, is once you have your problem statement, then you will have to have your research question. Now, usually, what we normally do in practice is we have a research question and then we formulate the problem statement. In practice, that's what happens. But because of the layout, usually the problem statement is placed before the research question. So they must tie up. So really what happens is, so the problem has to be constructed such that it automatically flows into your research question. All right. And so this is very important. So we'll be talking about the research question afterwards as well. Right. So basically, as I mentioned just now, problem statement is a very important part of a research proposal, because it will highlight to the reviewer, or you need to highlight to the reviewer, why there is a problem. That's one. And also you have to highlight why it is important to address this problem. All right. Now, just a little bit I'll mention here. Is it important to have the research title reflected on the problem statement or vice versa? Can it really impact or whether or not your proposal is successful? The answer, of course, is yes. Now, it is very important. A lot of the times we find that the title, the problem statement, the research question, they do not match very well. All right. So when you're preparing a proposal, your problem statement, so normally actually what you could do is you have a problem, you can write out the problem statement. You have a research question, write out a problem statement, and then you think about the appropriate title. Make sure that it is reflected in the title. And whatever is in the title is also reflected in the problem statement. All right. So I will just, although it's, I'm talking about purely about problem statement, but I'll mention these things along the way to indicate to you when reviewers are looking at your proposal, they will look at the title first. All right. Then they'll look at the executive summary. Then perhaps they'll look at the literature review and how you have gone about, highlighting the problem. All right. So the problem statement. So there has to be a link. All right. So there has to be a constant flow. So immediately the reader will perhaps, be able to follow your proposal very well. So it is important that you do that. All right. And there are a number of reasons as to why it is important. Certainly a good title will help the reviewer establish a connection, as I mentioned just now, with your problem and the proposal. All right. So there has to be a connect. Your title or your problem statement has to be connected to the title or vice versa. All right. Because that is very important. Because if from the very outset, if the reviewer does not see a good connect, it does not give a good impression. All right. So a negative impression, will then, really, I think the reviewer will be a little uncertain and they may not even bother reading very much intensely. So really, I think it's very important. Your title and your, has to be reflective of the problem clearly. And it has a good title has to be there. All right. And of course, the title should not be confusing as well. All right. Because if it's too confusing, too convoluted, it's not very clear, again, it will not reflect the, very well. And the reviewer might have, a different impression altogether even before he starts to read your problem statement. So a good title, of course, is usually one that is well linked to the problem. All right. And I mentioned just now, like the executive summary, a good title is also a good show window. All right. All right. Now, there has to be, as I mentioned just now, there has to be a flow between your title, problem statement, your research question, aim, study design, and what have you. All right. All right. So I have talked about the importance of a good problem statement and also the importance of a clear connect between the problem statement, the title. And let's very quickly look at the key components or elements in a problem statement. What are the key components? What are the things that you need to include in a problem statement? All right. So what are these? What are these key elements? One, of course, is clearly state the problem. So it must have the problem which is clearly stated and with enough contextual detail, enough supporting evidence, if you like. Of course, a lot of it will be in the background review that you're going to do, but still here you need to have some sort of, evidence to show that there is a problem. And you want to establish why it is important, or there is a need, a pressing need, if you like, to investigate it. All right. So this is very important. All right. So the problem statement, it didn't have to be very long. All right. So you have to clearly state the problem with enough contextual evidence. You cannot just say this is a problem, but you must have some context to indicate that this is a problem in the problem statement itself. All right. The other element that you need to have in the problem statement is the scope of the research as well. All right. So what exactly you will be addressing. So that's important because they need to know that. And very briefly state how the proposed research will help solve the problem. Right? And so these are the key elements that a reviewer looks for in a problem statement. Right? As I said just now, a problem statement needn't have to be very long. All right. It could be half a page. It could be even a quarter page, but should not be very long. 3/4 page is fine, because if you make it too long and you put too much information, the reviewer might just lose interest along the way, or he might forget what he has read, and the issue gets diluted a little bit. We tend to forget as well along the way what we have read. So really, I think sometimes it's nice to actually the essential parts of the problem, you can actually highlight them as well in the proposal, if you like. I've seen that done in some places. All right. So really, these are the key elements that are required to be included in a problem statement. So now you know what elements you must have. How do you frame, how do you identify, first of all, a problem? And how do you frame a problem or a purpose statement? Some people call it a purpose statement as well instead of a problem statement. So, how do you identify it? What do you need to do before you do that? All right. Now, this is what you need to do. This is very important. And a lot of the time, I think we find that this bit is not done very well. All right. So, it's really what you need to do before you might have a research question as well, but you have to really do a good literature search. And these days it is also very important, because what the reviewers do is, I mean, Google is there, they just Google very quickly, and before you know, they have all the publications on that. They may not even know anything about the subject, but they see the number of publications, they immediately begin to question your work. And so really what you need to do is to be absolutely certain that you have done a good search. Do a Google search thoroughly yourself first, and you know what is going to come out and what perhaps the reviewers will see later on, so you can start addressing them from the very outset itself. So you do a good literature research, and then you identify. Now, what you need to identify from the literature research is, what are the gaps in the literature? What is it that we do not know? What is it that we need to know that will help us solve the problem? All right. So really identifying the gap is very important, because a lot of the times, as I mentioned just now, there is, the proposals tend to have insufficient, or the researchers have not read sufficiently to really prepare a good research question, or highlight the gap that has to be addressed. All right. So this is very important, actually, because sometimes you probably think there is a problem and you have not read enough. It might have been attended to by somebody else, and perhaps it has already been addressed before. All right. So this is what we find. People will, the reviewers will come back and tell you, this work has already been done before, or this has already been addressed before. I'm not saying they're always right. I think quite a few times that they are not correct as well. But nevertheless, because of the nature of what we have today, the facilities we have, the technology we have, and this is what is the result now. Because, as I said, you press a term and into Google, and you will get, thousands of references coming out on that term that you have entered. And it is, the reviewers will think, well, there's a lot of work done already on this, so therefore it's not quite a big problem. All right. So really, I think it's very important. You read the literature very carefully, and you clearly identify a problem related to the gap. Okay, what is the missing information? What is it that you need? What is it that we need that could help us solve the problem, or put us on the path to solving the problem? All right, so that is very important. All right. Like, for example, just the current situation now, for example, when COVID-19 first became a pandemic, or when it broke out first, I'm sure we know there. After a while, we realized how deadly it was. All right, how severely it was affecting people. So that was clearly a problem. All right. So when you're writing a problem, for example, on COVID research, you're bound to mention that the impact COVID has had on not only on the health, but the overall economy of countries, in fact, at all sectors virtually. All right. So that would be of course, when you're preparing, if let's say on a COVID, this is what automatically you will do. All right. Now, how do you handle this? All right. So obviously they know that, okay, one solution could be, one way of tackling it would be, of course, to find the right treatment or to prevent it. So somebody would have thought, okay, let's just see how we can make a vaccine, because vaccines, we know in the past, have helped prevent diseases or even eliminated diseases. All right. So we have two situations now. You have this COVID outbreak, and the way it is affecting the health of the people, and we know we have the vaccine. So what is the missing information there? The missing gap is, to make the vaccine, we will need to know a lot more about this virus. So that's a missing information. That's a missing gap. So whoever perhaps started the vaccine, they may have probably looked at it and say, okay, I need to identify the genome of this virus. So that is a missing gap. So they would have written a proposal, a problem statement with that, and say that is a missing gap that I need to fill. And it is important, because if I can get the genome, I can understand the virus better, I will be able to produce the vaccine, and I will be able to help solve the problem created by COVID. So this is a very simple, typical example. I mean, this is how it will work. See, and fortunately for us, I think this is what's happened in a way, actually, because the vaccine now it is reducing the impact of COVID. Right. So really, I think this is what I mean by identifying the gap, that information that you need that will help solve your problem. So how do you go about? I'll just a problem statement. You know, framing a problem statement is very important. So how you would go about framing a research problem statement. All right. So I've already so far highlighted what a problem statement is and what it should be addressing. So how do you frame it? All right. Usually a problem statement will consist of 3 to 4 parts. All right. And the first part of the problem statement is usually an introduction, or you give a general view or a world view or a larger national or regional goals, for example, is usually in 3 to 5 sentences. Like I mentioned just now, if you are going to work on COVID, for example, any work now generally on COVID, you want to investigate about COVID, you are bound to start with the impact of COVID, or the impact that COVID has had on the health, on the economy of the country, and education, whatever it is, you are going to stress that. So that you are bound to. So this is what we mean by giving a general and world view, all right, or a larger national. But we don't want that too extensive, because you are not going to be looking at or addressing the issues of health or issues of the economy or issues of education here in your proposal, because your idea was to sort of study a little more about the virus, maybe the vaccine, or perhaps, um, uh, something like, we know that COVID people more affects more people who have some comorbidities, if you like. So you may want to know, why is that those people with some morbidities are more susceptible to COVID uh, uh, 19 infection complications, if you like. So that could be a research study as well. But in the main, generally, in the first few sentences of a problem statement, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 statements, not very lengthy. You will give an overview. For example, if you want to work on hypertension, you will probably mention a few sentences on the prevalence of hypertension and what impact it is having, all right, in terms of its economic, societal cost, and the complications, so and so forth. Or if you're working on obesity, you may want to talk about that, or infertility or cancer. So really a few general statements should be there in the beginning itself to highlight that there is a problem that we need to address. All right. So the problem starts from here. All right. And in the next part of the problem statement, all right, then you state the real problems that the research wants to focus on. So if you want to um, develop a vaccine, for example, for COVID, you will talk about the gap that is not there for you to be able to do that. All right. So you will talk about the real problem, the research that you want to do. You want to find out, you want to study the genome of the virus so that you will be able to develop a vaccine. All right. Or, for example, if you have a new drug that you think could work, and it needs to be tested. So you will indicate that, yes, that this is a problem, that we do not know what the mechanism of action of this drug is for us to be able to use it properly. So you that is the gap you need to fill. So these are general examples that I'm giving, how your problem statement should flow. You have a general statement, then you come to the specific, the real problem that the research wants to focus on. So it's more specific area of the problem statement that you need to address. All right. And here you need to include some verifiable evidence. Of course, there will be a lot of evidence already in your literature review, your background information, but nevertheless, you have to make a few statements here that what you are saying is true, that the problem actually exists, and what would be the consequences if this problem is not addressed. All right. So you have to put that in the problem statement. All right. So I've just given another example here. For example, when I was writing these slides, I didn't think of the COVID. The COVID has just come into my mind just now. But nevertheless, I was just, this is another example. If the problem statement is about a new drug that can better treat the disease, then you begin, like, for example, treat hypertension, obesity, or cancer, or infertility, and so on and so forth. Then you begin with statements about the overall burden of the disease and how, if not addressed, it could impact adversely. All right. And then you state the importance of reducing it and how this research, the findings of the research could help you. All right. And how it will help to fill the gap. That would be the next thing that you will mention about how this investigation that you're proposing, this research that you're proposing, how it will help to reduce or improve the management of the disease. All right. So really, I think, perhaps, as I mentioned just now, the first part could be about 3 to 5 sentences. The second part could be in 10 to 15 sentences, because that's where the emphasis is going to be in the main, because so that should be where your research question will be originating from as well. All right. And then, of course, how it will benefit, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences, no problems. And what they also expect to see these days is how it relates to the national or the funding agency's needs, if you like. So you need to state that in the problem statement as well. All right. So this is roughly what you would be thinking about when you're preparing a problem statement. All right. So remember that the 3-4 parts, that 3-4 sections that a problem statement has. So you have a general, you have a specific, you mention the gap that you're going to fill, and then how this gap is going to be beneficial. All right. So these are the things that you would need to include in the problem statement. Then once you have done, then of course your research question would be next. All right. As I mentioned earlier on, usually in practice we always think of a research problem, a question first, and then we formulate, or we then try to craft a problem statement. All right. In practice, that's what I do, and I'm sure many others do as well. But when the proposal is read, this is the flow. Actually, you have a problem statement, then you have a research question. All right. So you have to, from the problem statement, make sure they're all linking. That's very important. So your research question should actually come out from all your literature review, your problem statement. All right. So that's where your research question should come out. So you identify that issue and you craft a well-defined research question, if you like. That's very important. All right. So you make sure that the question is not very long, not very convoluted. It is nicely crafted. These are the selling points, because, the reviewer always would want to read something that is easily understood. They don't want to be looking or to see how they can understand what you have written. It is one of those things, because the onus is on you to make sure you clearly write your research question and your hypothesis, whatever you have. All right. So a research hypothesis, of course, usually identify what you expect to find from your research study. All right. But the research question is what it is that you want to answer. All right. And research hypotheses are normally found a lot of the time in quantitative research proposals, like, for example, when they compare differences or relationships between independent variables and dependent variables. So this is where you will hypothesize. All right. But important thing, as I keep repeating, I'm sorry I have to keep repeating, but it's very important, because you will see a lot of research proposals, and I've seen quite a few during my time as well. There is not a very good flow between the literature review, the problem statement, and the research question. So remember, title, literature review, problem statement, research question, study design, they should all be linked, and there should be a good flow. All right. So that is important. So what is a research question? Research question is a specific, answerable inquiry into a specific issue or problem. That's a research question. So that is what you should be aiming to answer, to craft. It forms the base of where you are going. So you have to provide a good research question. So make sure always that your research question is good. All right. It has to be clear. It has to be focused. It needs to be quite concise as well. All right. So you don't want any ambiguous things in the research question. All right. So it has to be quite clear and concise. So how do you coin research question? All right. Again, it's very similar to how you would start with a problem. All right. Really, you have to do a lot of reading. So really, I think, when you are preparing a problem statement, you're doing a lot of reading. In a way, actually, you are reading to develop a research question. So do a lot of reading, clearly specify the specific concern or issue or gap that you wish to address. All right. So all these things, all they are related. Problem statement and research question, they're all related, as you'd see. And then decide what you want to know about the specific concern or issue. What is it that we want to know? So that would be your research question as well. So turn what you want to know and the specific concern into a question. All right. So that is that's how you develop a research question. And always make sure that the question you have is answerable. In other words, the study design that you're going to propose should be able to address or answer your question either way. All right. So really, it should be answerable. You don't want to coin a question that it would be very difficult to answer from your research design. And this is another thing that we see in proposals as well. The research question and the design, they do not tally very well. All right. And also make sure the research question is not too broad or too narrow. And what do I mean by these? So a good research question is one that is not too broad. All right. For example, of a broad question is, this is a simple one that I found somewhere. Why did the dog bite the owner's son? All right. If let's say you want to do a question in a community and say, all right, a dog bit somebody and the dog's bite. Why did the dog bite the owner's son? All right. To a reviewer, this is a very broad question because how are you going to answer it? I mean, what plans what exactly are you going to look at? So the better way to do is you put it, what factors could have caused the dog to bite the owner's son? So here you're going to be hypothesizing some of the factors and then you'll be investigating them. All right. So this is not a broad, this is a little more focused, the question is. All right. So it is very important that the question is not broad, it is a little focused. It is also specific. All right. For example, what are the effects of leptin on male reproductive function, for example? All right. I've included that. That's my area of interest as well. Now, this is again a very broad question. How could it be written better, if you like? Maybe you want to write it this way. What are the effects of leptin on sperm count, sperm morphology, sperm motility? All right. So what do you mean by reproductive function? These are the parameters that I'll be looking at. All right. So really, I think so. This is basically what it means, that when you are writing a research question, make sure it is not broad, too broad. It is sufficiently focused, sufficiently specific. And it's about something significant. That's important as well. And as I mentioned earlier, your research question is something that is researchable, answerable. In other words, you have the study design at your disposal that will help answer your research question. All right. So you don't want to coin a research question that you will not be able to actually study experimentally because you don't have the means of designing a study to answer the question. All right. It's nice if you can make the research question a little unique and a little creative as well. All right. Somehow it might impress the reviewers, but don't overdo it. But uniqueness, yes, if you can create something new, that would be helpful. All right. So that is, and as I mentioned just now, it must not be repeating. All right. Because if a question that has already been answered before may not sell very well, unless you really emphasize to say why it has to be re-examined, why it has to be studied again. If you have evidence to support that the previous study or the previous answers that we got perhaps were not adequate, not sufficient, or did not reflect completely the whole issue, I think then you are justified. But otherwise, I mean, to make sure, that's why literature reading and background reading is very important to prepare the problem statement and the research question. All right. So a research question is very important. All right, because the study design is usually planned around the research question. And the research question, of course, in a way help researchers to focus their research and provides a path through the research. So that is the research question. So what I've attempted to do this morning actually is really very quickly try to show you what an important problem statement should be, how it should look like, how you can craft it. Of course, I think you probably will have to see some good examples. I'm sorry, I do not have some good examples of problem statements and or bad examples of problem statements. But generally, I think if you look around, you will probably find. I mean, if you just do a Google, I'm sure you'll find some good examples of problem statements. But it's very important. The problem statement is crafted very well, and there is a continuous link from the title, literature review. Your executive summary, as I said, is very important, and then your problem statement and your research question and your study design. All right. So that is. I hope I have given you some hints as to how to prepare a research uh, problem statement, if you like. And as Prof. Tohara mentioned just now, of course, it does not guarantee success, but nevertheless, I think a good proposal with a good problem statement, good research question, good design will somehow, somewhere along the way, will find some funding and will succeed. Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the very informative talk. We learned so much from your talk. So I just wonder, is there any questions from the participants? It can be posted at the Q&A column, or it can be actually just uh, hands up. All right, bro. I mean, as we wait a question from participants, if
Yeah.
I may ask a very basic questions. I mean, like some of us do already pursue in their what we call research interests, and I
Yes.
think we already have the chain of problem statements.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
we have kind of how far we already have what we call our path towards the
Yes.
research. Yeah,
Sure.
Prof. How about the new ones? I mean, like, is there any source that we actually can help us to gain a very interesting problem statement? I mean, like, how they actually can get what we call their first idea. I
Mm,
mean, like,
mm.
yeah, for example, the first what we call novelty and very interesting idea. As such, this is their first grant. They try to
Yes. Yes.
apply the grant, right? So, is there
Yes.
any way, Prof, either to read news or something like that? As such, they
Mm.
can get this idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think what, of course, most of the people who are applying for research grants and all that would have done some research for their thesis, for example, master's or a PhD thesis. So they have some research background already. So it could be an extension from their PhD thesis itself. All right. So when they were preparing their PhD thesis, they might have some ideas, but then, of course, these have to be crafted very nicely into a proposal. All right. So this is where I think for newcomers, I think obviously, if you have not read around enough, if you have prepared a thesis, usually your literature review that you have done in your thesis is quite adequate for you to be able to identify at least some problems, in that area. Now, the thing to do is here, of course, is this is where I think the role of senior members come in. I think the mentors here can help. Your supervisors can help. All right. So really, I think I've said before as well. Getting a PhD just after a PhD does not make you an independent researcher. Although a PhD is licensed for independent research, but we know today it does not make you one because there are so many things you need to learn. And one of the things that you need to learn about is how to prepare research proposals and how to get funding. And so for beginners, the thing to do is, of course, if you want to stick to the problem that you have addressed in your thesis and you have got more questions that have come out of that investigation, yes, by all means, I mean, you can follow that would be a good thing to do. But if you want to change your area of research, then of course you have to do a lot of reading. You have to look for a mentor. You have to look for someone senior, join a group, and you learn the trade through that way. I mean, it's very competitive now getting money. So one way is basically, I think, unless you are exceptionally brilliant in crafting questions from the very outset and you are very clear and you are able to are gifted, it's going to be very difficult. So more, if you see most of the researchers, they always have this training, if you like. They complete their postgraduate studies, they join a group or they remain with the same group, they join as postdocs, they learn the trade. All right. So, and that's how they actually start maturing in their thinking and formulation of research questions and problem statements. So really, I think for beginners, my suggestion would be, yes, read around a lot, if you want to start on a new area, and find a group or find someone who is working, or find someone senior, someone to mentor you, someone who can help you in developing a research proposal.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Yeah.
Prof. Harbindar, thank you so much
Okay.
for being here to be able to give your talk. I just wanted to find I just wanted to pose a question in terms of your experience. I mean, you've had a lot of experience in terms of research and getting research proposals. What has changed over the years that could actually assist the participants in formulating their research questions and directing them in the right path? Because I presume the needs of the nation has changed
Yes.
as we move through the years. So maybe if you can give us some of your experience in terms of what you think has changed in terms of what they're accepting nowadays, the proposals.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's what immediately that I see now is what has changed is expectation of a proposal. It's become very competitive. There are a lot more submissions. And so, really, I think the way the proposals are prepared, the way the problem statements are coined, I think, and particularly their significance and the relevance. And so this is what has changed, actually. This is what I noticed over the years. And also, I think the intensity in how the research proposals, I've seen the research proposals in the beginning, of course, the proposal used to be fairly straightforward. You just wrote what you wanted to do and why you want to do, very simply. And I noticed over the years, the forms have also evolved. They have changed. They want a lot more information. And so that is one of the changes. So in other words, they require a lot more information before, when you submit your research proposal compared to what it used to be. And so therefore, I think because of the competition, you need to be absolutely clear as to what it is that you want to investigate, why it needs to be investigated. Yeah. That is immediately, I see that has changed over the years. Funding, of course, has increased, but I don't think it has increased enough in our country. I think there are a lot more researchers and they could do with more funding. And I think it's a shame that some of the researchers, there are good researchers, and they miss out because there are some very good proposals too that fail to get funding because of unfortunate reasons for some purpose that they perhaps they can't control. But nevertheless, actually coming back, I think a good proposal, that is what has changed now. Previously, I noticed actually, it used to be a little easier to write proposals than now. They want a lot more information in research proposal, and clear information, concise information, and not very mechanistic as well now.
Okay, good morning, Prof. I think this is my question. Alia is here. What I understand, Prof, that the problem statement should not be brief, should be detailed and even goes to subsection, like as you described just now for us, Prof. So we should...
Sorry,
Yes,
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I want to confirm, rather than just writing one line or two line, we need to make it more detailed.
Yes. As I mentioned just now, I indicated roughly approximately what the size of a problem statement should be.
Yes.
You don't want it to be too long, and you don't want it to be too short that you miss out the important message.
Okay.
All right. So that's important. So as I mentioned just now, you will have an overall general overview that could be about 2 to 5 sentences, if you like. Then you have your gist of the issue that you want to address, the problem, that could be about 10 to 15 lines. And then, what it is that you are going to do and what would be the outcome and how it will solve the problem. So in total, I think, if you have a research problem of about 20 lines, 20 sentences, I think that should be just nice. Yeah. Something very long, if it is too long, running to 2 pages, I think the reviewer will probably lose track of what they are reading, and you probably will miss the message. So really, I think you don't want it too brief, you don't want it too long. And in my estimation, in my own view, I think half to 3/4 of a page is just sufficient, to highlight the problem. And to make the statement. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
There's a question, Prof, from Associate Professor Dr. Mudiana Muhammad.
Yes.
I read it for you.
Yes.
Actually, you
Yes.
can see it at the front.
That's
Many
right.
thanks,
That's right.
Prof.
Yes.
Looking at the
Yes.
framework of the problem statement, it seemed quite
Yeah.
extensive and covering
Yes.
most, if not all, the content of an executive summary.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yes.
so my question is, what is are the differences between problem
Yes. Yes.
statement
Yes.
and executive summary? All right, Prof.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spot on. Actually, in any research proposal, there's going to be a lot of overlap. All right. So there's going to be a lower overlap in the literature review as well. All right. Now, executive summary is something. Of course, it must show the problem to there, what it is that you're going to do. All right. And in the executive summary, of course, you probably also have to finally indicate what are the benefits, what are the gains, what are the all that you have to do. But executive summary is usually shorter. All right. And yes, I agree with you, Mariana. There is going to be an overlap. You can't avoid that. So really, I think you have to then use the words and write it in a way that it will look different, but imparting the same message, if you like. Yeah.
I see. Understand, Prof. I
Yes, yes,
mean,
yes.
we face this problem many times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, to avoid the repetitiveness
Yes, yes, yes.
between the executive summary and the problem statement.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
Because the guidelines that they give you for the executive summary, they also ask you to mention,
Yeah.
introduction, problem statement,
Exactly.
methodology. Yeah, you see, you have to state a little bit about the methodology. So really, I think
Mm-mm.
in some ways you're very right. Actually, there is not much difference between executive summary and a problem statement. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yes, Prof.
usually because of the layout, they will read the executive summary first, and then the
Mm-mm.
problem statement will come afterwards after they have read the literature that you have reviewed. All right,
Yes,
then you
correct.
have the problem statement. So really, I think that it should link to the literature review, and should show as it has arisen from the literature
Mm-mm.
review. Yeah,
Usually, we have a limit of the number of words for the executive summary.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
200,
No.
300. So really, yeah.
Yes.
So
Uh-uh.
a problem statement will definitely be about 400 to 500 words, and that would be a good problem statement. Yeah,
Okay. All right,
yeah.
Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. There's
Yeah.
one question actually from Dr. Azah Issa.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for your talk. How do I focus on a singular idea when have many ideas of interest? Thank you, Prof.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, you have a very fertile mind, actually. I mean, I do not know exactly what you have to probably decide amongst them, which is the one that is closest to you. All of interest, which is the one that is of more interest, and which is one that is doable. And I think that is, if you're not very sure, then of course you can discuss with your peers, discuss with your mentors, discuss with the senior people, and or read the literature itself and to see which one is actually the current focus of study, if you like, because it's always nice to have something very topical. And reviewers look for research proposals that are addressing some topical issues. So maybe you want to go that way and discuss with someone, read around a lot, look at their topical issues, and then see where you can focus your interest. And then gradually, of course, you can expand your interest. It didn't have to be just in one area. All right. So you can always expand as you go along. As you progress in research, you'll find a lot of senior researchers, they have so many areas that they are working in at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that's useful, Azza. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof.
You're welcome. Right. Right.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Azah, for actually a very valid question, Prof. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. I
Yeah,
mean, it is true, actually. That's it. No, some people say, "Where do I start? I've got so many ideas."
yeah.
That's right. I think it's just a matter of then looking in the literature, reading around, and discussing with some seniors, and see what facilities you have, what you can do, and then you pick an area that you can then progress on. Yes, yes.
So I think, okay. So I think, thank you so much, Prof. I think it's a very fruitful talk. We learned so much from only problem statement, and we can
Mm.
see that how important is actually the most important gist of the proposal to get your proposals, your problem statement right and attract your
Yeah.
assessor, right, Prof? That is the first
That's right.
thing they
That's
really,
right. These are selling points. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
selling points, yeah, the first
Mm.
selling points
Mm.
of a proposal, and then you have all of the other things
Yeah.
following the problem statement.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you
Yes.
so much, Prof. I think
Pleasure.
if you have any further question, I think Prof Harbindar is very willing to actually give
Pleasure. Yeah.
any. Yeah, you can email Prof, and I say Prof is very willing to help you. I mean, like in terms of proposal and also the problem statement. Thank you so much, Prof, for your
Thank you.
time. It's
Thank
a
you.
very nice talk. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much. So for all the participants, I think we actually now can start our mentoring session. So the session for IC speaker speech is already end for this morning. So you can just stay, and then once we end this session, you can see there are lots of rooms. So you can go to your mentor. And then I would like to have another announcement. This workshop is actually awarded CPD points. So I will actually give the QR code at the noon session, and we will keep remind you about the QR code. So the value is 12 CPD points. So thank you so much again, Prof. And
Thank you. Pleasure.
we meet again for the
Yes.
next speech talk, I think at 11:30. So you can go into your small rooms now for the mentoring session. Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Okay,
Thank
bye
you.
bye. Thank you so
Bye
much.
bye.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.